So once again, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting of November 30th, 2021. I'd like to call the members to order. Although this meeting is being held remotely through Zoom, I would like to acknowledge that the land on which Ottawa is built upon is unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that the peoples of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and the City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable contributions to this land. For those who do not need to participate in the meeting, you can watch it live on the Ottawa City Council YouTube channel. A reminder to participants to please keep your microphones muted until I call upon you to speak. I will provide each committee member with the opportunity to ask questions or comment on each item in the order in which they raise their hand in Zoom. For panelists, the raise hand option is found at the bottom of the participants list. For those calling in, press *9 to raise your hand. The committee coordinator and I will be watching for those cues. Members are also reminded to submit any motions, visual supports, or declaration of interests in writing to the coordinator at their earliest opportunity. Although the deadline have passed for residents to register to speak and provide written submissions to this subcommittee, residents may still make written submissions to council. If you have technical difficulties signing into the meeting, you can contact the committee coordinator by calling 613-580-2424, extension 22953. A reminder that if participants are having technical issues with their Zoom connection, they may call in using the backup telephone number provided by the coordinator. I'd also like to note that we will be piloting a new system this morning at this subcommittee meeting where the coordinator will provide a countdown for deputants. So there will be a time clock implemented so that you can see how much time you have in terms of your deputation. In terms of regrets, I've received no formal regrets, but we have received a note from Councillor Moffat that he did have a prior commitment from 10 to 11 a.m. For the Climate Change Councillor Sponsors Group. Could the committee coordinator please call the roll? A reminder to members to unmute themselves when they're called.
Member Halsell.
Here.
Member Podolsky.
I'm here.
Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Member Conforti.
Present.
Councillor Brockington.
Morning.
Councillor Moffat. Vice Chair Quinn.
Present.
Chair King.
And I'm here.
You have quorum, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, are the minutes of Tuesday, October 12th, 2021 confirmed?
Confirmed.
Confirmed. Thank you. Our first item regards planning, infrastructure, and economic development, right-of-way, heritage, and urban design services. Number one, an application for new construction at 480 Cloverdale Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation District. Can staff please provide an overview of this report?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Good morning, councillors and members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. This item concerns the application for new construction at 480 Cloverdale Road, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation District. Next slide, please. The subject property is located on the east side of Cloverdale Road between Hillsdale and Lakehurst Roads. It is bounded to the north by 484 Cloverdale Road and the rear of 560 Hillsdale Road, both Grade 1 properties in the HCD, and by the Rocklift Park Tennis Club to the east. South of the property is a vacant double lot at 454 Cloverdale Road. The property is currently vacant and is characterized by a mixture of mature trees and shrubs. There is a substantial grade change from the front of the lot at Cloverdale Road to the rear of the lot abutting the tennis courts. Next slide, please. The applicant is proposing to construct a new single detached home on the lot. The building will be 2 stories in height with a walkout basement opening up towards the rear of the lot. The proposed building is irregularly shaped as seen on the site plan on this slide, with most of its massing located away from the street in the middle of the lot. It'll be generally comprised of 3 wings with a 2-story side entry garage at the front and a 2-story floating volume or skybox at the rear. The building will be approximately 48 meters in length from front to rear. Next slide, please. This slide shows the elevations of the new building from the front and rear. The building is proposed to be clad in a combination of rough-cut stone, wood siding, and copper. Rooftop terraces are proposed at the front of the building above the garage and at the rear above the skybox volume. Next slide, please. This slide shows the side elevations of the building. The north elevation abuts the Grade 1 property at 484 Cloverdale Road. As a result of the changes in grades, the rear of the north wing of the building will appear to be 3 stories in height on this elevation. Next slide, please. The application is accompanied by a conceptual landscape plan. 4 mature trees are proposed to be removed to accommodate the construction of the building, and 36 new trees are proposed to be planted. The landscape treatment of the property is proposed to consist of a combination of soft landscaping, permeable paving, formal gardens, planters, and green roofs. Next slide, please. On this slide are renderings of the new building taken from various angles. Next slide, thanks. Applications for new construction in Rocklift Park are subject to the guidelines in the Rocklift Park HCD plan. Heritage staff have reviewed the proposal against the applicable guidelines of the plan and determined that the application is generally consistent with the plan. Next slide, please. While the proposed new house generally conforms with the HCD plan as it relates to siting, landscape, and materials, the proposed irregular massing of the building and the length of the north facade are not consistent with guidelines 7.4.2, 3, and 4 of the HCD plan. Heritage staff are of the opinion that the length and mass of the new building on the north elevation are not consistent with the neighboring Grade 1 building, and the new building is not sympathetic to its historic neighbors in terms of massing, particularly along the north elevation. As stated earlier, the length of the new building from front to rear, excuse me, along the north elevation is approximately 48 meters, or 4 times the length of its neighbor at 484 Cloverdale Road. Due to the changes in grade on the lot, the 2-story building will also appear as 3 stories from the perspective of its neighbors. This creates a wall condition along the north lot line that interrupts visual continuity in the landscape. Landscape and the siting of homes within it is a fundamental attribute of the HCD. Irrespective of property lines, there is consistency in the interstitial spaces between buildings in the HCD. The proposed length of the building thus creates a hard boundary that interrupts the flow of space between buildings on the block. Next slide, please. Heritage staff have also evaluated the proposal against Parks Canada's standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada and determined that it is generally consistent with standards 1 and 11 of that document. Next slide, please. The proposal was the subject of extensive consultation with the Rocklift Park Residents Association Heritage Committee. The applicant met with the committee and heritage staff in January, February, and July 2021, and joint comments were provided on the proposal. The proposal was revised several times to address many of these comments and to better conform with the guidelines in the HCD plan. The present application was posted on the city's development application search tool, and staff received comments from several neighbours. The Rocklift Park Residents Association was notified of the application and provided comments on the current proposal. Heritage Ottawa was notified of the application, as were neighbours within 30 metres of the subject property. And finally, Chair King is also aware of the application. Next slide, please. Heritage staff worked with the applicant on refining the proposal after submission of a complete application under the Ontario Heritage Act. It was strongly recommended to the applicant that the legislated 90-day timeline be extended to provide an opportunity to make further changes to the proposal that staff would be in a better position to support. An extension of the 90-day timeline was not agreed to by the applicant, and thus Heritage staff have evaluated the current proposal on its merits. Heritage staff are therefore recommending conditional approval of the application for new construction at 480 Cloverdale Road. This will provide the applicant with an opportunity to address the outstanding concerns. Staff are also requesting that authority be delegated for minor design changes and that a 2-year expiry date be attached to the heritage permit. Next slide, please. The following conditions are recommended by staff. 1, that the applicant reconfigure the massing and reduce the length of the north elevation of the building. This is to ensure that the original design intentions of Rocklift Park be maintained and that the height and mass of the new building are consistent with and sympathetic to the neighboring Grade 1 building. This could be achieved in a variety of ways. For example, possibly by removing the floating volume at the rear, reorganizing some of the massing to the south side of the lot, or by rotating a portion of the building away from the north lot line. 2, that revised plans be submitted prior to the issuance of a building permit. And 3, that the applicant provide a final grading plan, final landscape plan, and samples of final exterior building materials prior to the issuance of a building permit. Fulfillment of these conditions are recommended to be approved by the General Manager of the Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Department or their delegate. Next slide, please. And that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adrian, for a very in-depth presentation on this application. We did receive correspondence that was submitted to the clerk's office, where we did receive comments from Heritage Ottawa, as well as comments from a resident. We also received 3 letters in opposition to the application by residents, as well as from the Rocklift Park Heritage Committee. We do have 8 registered speakers. So we will start with our first delegation, which is Kim Retushny.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning. My name is Kim Retushny, and I am here with my husband, Kent Manderville. My family's property is the Grade 1 heritage property at 484 Cloverdale, immediately adjacent to 480 Cloverdale. My family is most affected by this application. However, all of the Rocklift residential community, conservation district, and potentially others are also affected. We have serious concerns regarding the application. Its obvious multiple residences, its massive institutional character, and those are to name only 2. I won't go into all of our specific concerns, there is no time. I have sent you 2 letters detailing our specific concerns, one dated November 16th and another dated November 24th. If you haven't had a chance to review our letters, I respectfully ask that you consider them before coming to a decision. What I do want to emphasize today are 2 points. First, I urge you to reject the application and not simply approve it conditionally. I will return to the first problem of granting a conditional approval in a moment. Second, there has been no mention made, and perhaps it's been considered to be of no significance, that the residence for the Chinese embassy is right across the street from the property in this application? Is this new multiple residence development to be a foreign government residence expanded from the one that is already across the street? The application only makes mention of its use by 3 generations. It should be noted that there is also currently an additional and larger vacant lot adjacent to the property of concern in this application. If this is to be an expanded foreign government residential compound, this then adds a completely different dimension to the application and necessarily engages serious federal government security and intelligence issues that should be assessed prior to approval. The neighborhood and the federal government should know about this potential in advance. Now let me return to the problem with the granting of a conditional approval as has been recommended to you by city staff. My main point here is that to grant conditional approval of this application will make a mockery of the heritage process. It makes a mockery of the heritage process because you would be conditionally approving fundamental and significant unknowns. The applicant's drawings, and here they are, this is what we've been provided with, are incompatible with the siting, massing, height, and setbacks of the 484 Cloverdale Grade 1 heritage property. Major changes have to be made to the application. We won't know, and the public won't know, what those changes will be down the line if your decision is to grant conditional approval now before the necessary changes are specifically made by the applicant and brought forward for consideration in another public hearing. All we know now is what the drawings sent to us from the city tell us, that tall institutional buildings, massive in scale, will dominate the property, destroy the continuity of heritage green space, and contribute nothing in terms of heritage attributes to the neighborhood. The applicant has known since before its purchase of the property that heritage requirements have to be met, and the applicant has consulted extensively with City and Rocklift Park heritage representatives. Why should the applicant be given approval now? The fundamental heritage requirements must be met in advance in order to obtain heritage approval. Why should the applicant be given a green light to negotiate major heritage requirements later and in a completely non-transparent way? What I am also saying is very basic, and that is that any conditional approval should be reserved for minor changes and not for fundamental and significant heritage requirements. I conclude by respectfully asking you not to grant conditional approval and to reject the application. I recognize that a rejection will not get this matter, quote, off your desk, unquote. However, a rejection is the right thing to do at this time. When the application has been modified in a respectful, realistic, and transparent way to meet heritage requirements, it is able to be submitted again. Finally, I understand that our November 24th letter to committee and council was not forwarded to you by city staff until last night. I understand my time is up.
Yes, your time has expired. Do you have a quick wrap up?
Yeah. I do, yes. Finally, I understand that our November 24th letter to committee and council was not forwarded to you by city staff until last night. If you have not already done so, I respectfully ask again that you read both our letters to you before coming to a decision. And I emphasize our request for written reasons at page 2 of the November 24th letter. In accordance with the City of Ottawa's public law duty of procedural fairness, given the importance and significant impact of the City of Ottawa's decision-making on this application to our property, our family, and the Conservation District, as well as our legitimate expectations under the Ontario Heritage Act, we request that this committee and council provide us with their written reasons if the City of Ottawa's ultimate decision is to approve this application.
And I thank you. We are in receipt of the letter, and I did read that. So we will endeavor to ensure that we follow up with you, or that staff does. Are there any questions for Kim?
I will just say though, I just don't want to
I'll have to halt you there because and there is a question from Member Conforti for you.
Not a question, Chair. I just wanted to ensure the guest that I did read her letter as well. So just to give her a little bit of confidence there.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay. Thank you. Seeing no other questions for Kim, we'll move on to our next delegate, who is Kent Manderville.
I'm not sure, Chair, if the speaker is with us.
I think that was Kim's spouse, so they might have been sharing the connection. So there we go.
Good morning. What we wanted to make sure was that Kim's message got through. So really, I have nothing further to add, but I will want to make one point. It was noted in, I believe it was the consultant's report with regard to COVID. And the observation was made in the consultant's report as far as with COVID, there's a real tendency within our society now is to be inward looking. And one thing that we did notice with COVID, we were all stir crazy, we were all locked up in our houses. But one thing that really was a saving grace, and you could really see it in our neighborhood, was how many people were really drawn to nature. And it wasn't so much about being inward, about having all your amenities within your own complex and fortify and have it like a bunker. It was really about being in nature. And it was wonderful to see in our neighborhood how people were drawn from outside the neighborhood to come and walk and enjoy the trees and the green space, and really what the Heritage District is trying to preserve. And my only observation would be for you to really take Kim's words in mind and preserving that green space as per the Heritage District Plan. I have no further things to add, and I wanted to thank everybody for your presence today.
Thank you for that. Any questions for Kent? I don't see any, but I just had a quick question that maybe speaks more to the Heritage Conservation Plan in and of itself, and maybe speaking to specifics, since you raised the idea of green space. We know that in the Rocklift Park HCD, it's unique because green space is an element, is a characteristic of the plan. So I was wondering if you could speak to specific substantive green space impacts of this application.
Well, the one thing that I think during the report with what Adrian mentioned, he talked about a wall going up, and a lot of the emphasis was really on the streetscape. So it's almost like having a mouse in front of an elephant, where we're just looking at the mouse and we're neglecting all the green space behind. And so that's one thing, like I said, people come to the neighborhood, they enjoy the green space, and this massing of an institution would take away from that. Thank you.
I appreciate that answer. And seeing no other questions, thank you, Kent, for your delegation. The next registered speaker is John Stewart from Commonwealth Historic Resource Management.
Good morning. I'm sorry, for some reason my camera, I'm here though, but I'm
okay, and we can hear you, so you can go ahead.
Eric, could you go to the slides, please?
Perhaps the chair, the speaker, could elaborate which slides. I don't believe I've received slides from him.
I'm sorry, I sent them last night to you, Eric. It was a PowerPoint presentation. a PDF PowerPoint presentation?
Chair, it might take me a few moments to retrieve these, but
Okay, so at this moment, it might make more sense for us to go ahead with our next delegate to queue up those slides for John. So if the board would indulge, that would be my suggestion. And if we could hear from Andrew Reeves, it would be appreciated.
Morning.
Good morning.
Hi. Hi. I will introduce myself as Andrew Rees, principal architect at Linebach Studio, and the architect that has been involved with this application day one. My little background information on some of these things, it sheds some light both on the client and also on the development itself. It is a single family residence. It is not multi-unit. Zoning doesn't permit any of those uses. So currently, it's a single family dwelling on a special client, special site, special neighborhood. And we're very well aware of those elements when we took on this project. The client themselves, it is a multi-generational family. So they presented us with the challenge of designing a home not just for them and the family which they want to create in this neighborhood, but also support their aging parents who would like to live with them in the same residence. That was part of the challenge of the client. The site, as described, is quite unique from Rocklift, both the size and the length. And Ottawa's not known for very many sloping sites, but this is one of them. And then obviously the specialness of the neighborhood. I'm very well aware of the history and the background of Rocklift. I currently live in the neighborhood and do projects in that neighborhood. So we took this very serious day one, and we made sure we assembled a team that could deliver the best product and the best home that we feel could serve all the needs and respond to everything, not just one thing. We hired John Stewart, who's present today, who's a heritage architect, Casa Verde Construction with Paul Gellett, lives in the neighborhood, builds in the neighborhood. And John Chapanic will be our landscape architect, award-winning landscape architect who has done a lot of work in Rocklift. So we want to make sure first that we bring together a team that could pull a product of this off and make sure that we do as much as we can. Over the last 6 months, we've met with Rocklift Planner Committee, the Heritage Committee. I do want to give a bit of applaud to Adrian with the evolution of the design. We've made multiple changes, including reducing height, eliminating rooftop terrace on the front, altering the one on the back, deleting fences, adding trees. Landscapes and drawings are scary at times when you're told to delete trees on both sides. So that's not exactly truthful what the neighbors will see. We have actually engaged one of the neighbors on Friday actually about relocating some of the trees so that these view lines are maintained. Obviously, it's our goal for both sides, not just neighboring properties, but our client as well also want to create these environments. We are not here seeking any minor variances. We are well within all setbacks. We actually have more green space on this property than most properties in Rocklift. So I stand, I guess, before the committee with a design and a special neighborhood and a special result. But we do stand behind the design that's been presented. It's been a very positive experience the last 6 months, responding to very real concerns. And I'm very much appreciative of this and all our projects where you're an invasive species into a neighborhood, no matter what the design is. No one wants construction. I don't want construction next to my house. New is scary, but I do want to emphasize that this is a single family house. It's not zoned for any institutional or commercial. It's not multi-unit. It's not even zoned for that either. It's a single family house with a real family who chose Rocklift on purpose because of the property that they could build a house that would house their family while living together and raise their children and go to the schools that we all know. Rocklift has an amazing things, not just physically, but their school process, their neighborhood. So this is a family that wants to be a part of it. There is no inside deal of some kind of embassy happening. It's not zoned for that either. So we're before you presenting a single family house for a client that has been extremely cooperative in this process. And when we presented multiple changes to the building, including bending it. And I think some of the slides have shown that, reducing the length, all these other things. They were very much open to supporting all the different design decisions. Obviously, we could take that building and make it 3 stories and jam in the front, and everybody have concerns about those things too. So our goal was to come up with what we feel is the best result for everything. How to respond to the sun, the landscape, the context, our clients, the neighborhood, the city. We try to do what we feel is the best result overall in response to as much as we possibly can. And we are confident with the result that we have now in front of you.
Thank you, Andrew, for providing us that statement. We do have some questions for you, starting with Councillor McKinney.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Andrew. We're being asked today to provide conditional approval, which is always, subjective, right? We're being asked to give staff delegated authority essentially to make a final decision, but that approval is subject to changes with respect to the length and the massing on the north elevation, which, as we saw and heard from the staff presentation, is not as submitted today sympathetic to the neighboring building. I guess what I'd like, as the architect, you'll be asked to look at those changes and come back to staff to ensure that it meets those conditions. So I wonder if you could provide us with some insight in terms of how you would and how you will accommodate that.
Yes, so thank you for that. And we would be more than prepared to do that. We have been doing that day one. I would like, I can't speak for the planning committee, but we have made multiple alterations to design, and frankly, for the better. The building is better than it was when originally submitted. So it's been tough and they've been hard, and I understand both sides. So we would be definitely open, and I know the client is open to making it better. His goal and our goal is to make the best home we possibly can. And if there's more further revisions to do so that are fair and reasonable, we look forward to doing this and seeing how this evolves once we bring in a landscape architect and keep evolving this project and make it that much better.
But I guess you didn't answer my question. That it is conditional approval that you will go away, make changes to ensure that north elevation is sympathetic. So I get that you have made changes up until today, but I have a difficult time agreeing with conditional approval. So I'll ask Mr. Stewart the same question when he appears in front of us. But I just wonder if there's something specific you can tell us, like, what are you looking at? You knew the report was coming, you knew what the recommendations were. So I just wonder if there is anything that you can tell us that you'll be able to do to meet those conditions.
Yes, no, we're well aware, and we know the contentious issue is, the last iteration was the kind of last volume at the back, where it has a little rooftop terrace. That's that little cube towards the rear, as well as we fully engaged landscape architect to bring his input about how to further screen this building through berming and trees that, all year round, winter and summer. So there's an evolution of design that will keep refining this building, and we look forward to that. And why we, I guess, are standing in front of everybody confident with what was there, we are not prepared to redesign the whole project. For us, we felt we went through all the necessary discussions, and the building, we're confident with the building that's in front of you. But yes, we're very well aware of the conditions that are there, and we're prepared to keep moving forward with that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And I see that Councillor Gower has dropped off the list.
Yes, my questions, Chair, were very similar to Councillor McKinney. So no more questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next person with their hand raised is Vice Chair Quinn. Oh, and you might be muted, Vice Chair Quinn.
My apologies. Thank you, Chair. My question was similar to Councillor McKenney's, and but I just to go over. Planner Van Wyck was quite specific in his presentation that staff are going to be looking for examples of a massing reconfiguration, a reduction in height, the possible reorganization of some of the massing to the south in the design. So I just want to be clear that what we're hearing from Mr. Reeves today is that there is no appetite on the part of the owner to revisit those kinds of changes in the proposal. Am I correct?
I would say our position is we're confident in front of you, and we want to proceed with the decision. Versus another 90 days. It's been 6 months of revising, and like I said before, positively. And I think the building, as a direct result, has gotten better on multiple counts. What has been written in the condition, I find fair and reasonable, and we definitely will look at those things. Reduction in height, we're under every setback, but as most architects know, how you distribute your massing can get better and less, more screening and those things. So we're prepared to keep refining, but I want to also be clear, we're not here in front of you, not confident with the design itself, as in doing major moves and reducing height. We're below height, we're well within side yard setbacks, well within side yard setback, actually not even to the back rear yard setback, and well under the overall landscape coverage. So, but that being said, I'm a big fan of making sure a building keeps evolving and getting better to the very end, especially when we start introducing landscape architecture and other elements that make this building better.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Vice Chair Quinn. And we have Member Podolsky with his hand raised as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Andrew, just wanted to make sure that I understood the position of the owner on meeting the conditions that are being recommended by the planning staff. And also, I would just like to understand the owner's position on the question of potential deferring of the application so that the 90-day period is extended in order to allow for the fairly, let's call them middle substantial concerns of the heritage staff to be satisfactorily met and met to the satisfaction of the Built Heritage Subcommittee and Council. And I take it from your comments that the owner is not interested or prepared to defer, having felt that you probably have gone as far as you can go, except for some minor tweaks. Have I got that correct? I just like to understand it.
And Andrew, you're muted.
Sorry, Zoom time. No, you're correct, Barry. The client has been very cooperative and open to changes along the way, and there's been significant changes along the way. We've gotten input from Rocklift group, neighbors, including on Friday, as well as a committee. So we're prepared to support the design in front of you, and the client is also feels confident with the design in front. So he's not prepared, or they are not prepared to go 90 more days.
Okay, thank you very much. I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Andrew, for your deputation. I just want to check with our coordinator, Eric, to see if John Stewart is ready to provide his deputation.
I have the slides ready, Chair, if you wanted to speak to them now.
Excellent. So, John, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Eric, could you put the slides on, please? Commonwealth prepared the CHIS for this particular project. It's been a rather interesting process. I'm a landscape architect, and I was quite intrigued when began this commission, in that the design for the building placed the landscape in the forefront. So rather than building a structure and clearing trees, the design was this sort of a series of linked pavilions which capitalize on the landscape, and sort of the total trees, mature trees on the site, I think only 4 are being removed as a result of the construction. So it was sort of an interesting flip where the building became secondary to the landscape, and that I found sort of interesting. The expression that is its Asian-inspired modernist expression. It's a series of linked pavilions. There are 3 wings. In the process, we have met with the community, we've met with the city, and a number of suggestions, recommendations for revision. The building itself has been simplified. The massing located away from the street and to the middle of the property. Next slide, please, Eric. Part of the mitigation was actually to take a look at the initial design. Is in fact this 100-foot expression that Adrian talked about. I want to point out, though, that the building above, just at the top here, in fact, what you're looking at is not just that building. The footprint of that building is almost twice that size, with a 2-story addition to the rear of the property, which actually pretty well fills the rear portion of the property. So in fact, it's what the design attempted to do is actually recognizing that that building is twice that size. They wrapped the portion of the building to the interior, and in fact have created almost a reflection of the elevation above with that size. In terms of the depth from the rear of the property, it was increased from the required 39 feet to 50 feet at the closest location. The average setback for each face are significantly more than required by city bylaw, and long north elevation is reduced in length. Next slide, Eric, please. The view below sort of illustrates what in fact is the quality of the landscape, and with the trees, it is an open landscape as Adrian's drawings indicated. It is quite concealed, and the existing building actually notches into the property line, so you don't have a straight property line between the 2 properties. And in fact, the front of the building is angled off to actually give the distance required. The arrow indicates where the building turns, and so in fact, it's not a straight line. It carries through, and the preservation of the existing trees, only 4 are lost. There are approximately 28 additional trees. Next slide, please. Some of the views, and in fact, I question the comment that the landscape continuity is blocked. From the street, you get good views of. Next door, the two buildings, 484 and 480 they fit comfortably on the street. The side view, the view is from the backyard of 484. In fact, you're in the middle of a building there that carries almost through to where the red line is, and there are views. The skybox is intended as part of the picturesque landscape. It's a character as an idea of a folly or an eye catcher in the landscape, but that's the intention of it. Next slide, please, Eric. In terms of footprint, the buildings within the neighborhood, the scale of the footprint, I don't think it always exceeds any of the 3-story and 2-story buildings in the area. As I said, the building next door is in fact twice that size as shown on the plan. Next slide.
And John, you're at time, so I don't know if you can just quickly wrap up. Oh, perfect. Okay.
The conclusion, based on the CHIS evaluation, the design is respectful of the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation Guidelines. I think Adrian listed those guidelines and how they conform. The design maintains visual continuity within the neighborhood. It generally is consistent with the applicable standards and guidelines, Standard 1 and Standard 11, plus the landscape guidelines. And over the course of the design, mitigation measures have been incorporated to reduce the height, the visual impact of the building size along the north side, and increase the setbacks. And finally, I think it's the design is compatible with the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw requirements. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, John, for your delegation. And you do have a question from Councillor McKinney.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, John. I guess you probably know what my question is. Again, we are being asked to provide conditional approval. So we're not given a direct recommendation here by staff. So do you also feel that the mitigation that you've already gone through on the north side, is adequate, or can you give us some examples of what you would do to bring that in line with the approval that's subjected to the changes that are being requested by staff here?
I think the mitigation has addressed a lot of the issues that that I was concerned with in terms of impact. Certain aspects have been said that I'm not really sure. I mean, the height is I think it's a 1.5 feet higher than the building next door. So visually, it's not an impact. To answer your question, though, I don't see any reason why the solutions can't be drawn from to address some of the issues that have been raised. I think in some cases, the analysis is tilted one way or the other, but I think in fact you can work with this, and in fact within the I guess the mandate or the requirements of the owner and his family, that there could be adjustments made. I'm speaking in terms of impact as opposed to design, but I think that there are reasonable potential for additional mitigation.
But specifically, the approval is subject to changes in the length and massing of the north elevation. So do you believe that the length and massing today is sympathetic to the neighboring building?
I do. In fact, Adrian used the reference as 4 times. In fact, I don't think it is 4 times. I think the actual building above is twice the size of what is being shown on the plan. And that if you see where the break has been made as part of the mitigation and the building turns inside, in fact, that length is reflective of what's happening on the north, to the north, on the property next door. So the analysis, I'm not sure I hadn't seen that until today. So the analysis, I'm not sure how it came about, that particular component. There's a reference to a skybox. It's kind of a unique little feature. In fact, I was quite taken with it as part of the sort of English landscape or the picturesque landscape, where you would have these follies or you would have these elements as eye catchers in the landscape. And in fact, it reinforces or supports or focuses attention as part and parcel of that continuity of landscape. So there are elements there that are less than essential that could possibly be modified, I think.
Okay, thanks, John. Thank you, Chair.
I don't think I answered your question. I'm not sure. I tried.
No, but I didn't fully expect it. Thanks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Councillor. And I don't see any other questions for John. Oh, I do see that Vice Chair Quinn has actually raised her hand for a question for John.
Thank you, Chair. Last minute. Thank you for your presentation, John. Just a quick question in terms, just following up on Barry's question to the architect about the possibility of extending the 90 days. Is this something you think? What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing here is that, I think we're getting there. I'm hearing it's close. And I can certainly understand why the owner would not want to extend an additional 90 days. But if this could be deferred until the next meeting of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, for instance, taking us just to the end of January, do you think this is something that the owner would be amenable to?
The whole deferral thing, I wasn't aware of it until just this morning. So the answer to your question is, I don't know. I mean, the owner, I don't know if you know him. He has a development firm. He is Coven Developments. He's quite active in the city. And he's very cooperative. He's very interested he wants to be part of the community. I don't think the direction or the earlier discussion of this being a sort of a political maneuvering is I was never aware of any of that kind of a situation. So I think as a citizen, as an active member of Ottawa's business community, I'm quite sure he's prepared to negotiate and work with. But I'm speaking sort of just from what I know of him. I honestly don't have that mandate to say yes or no.
I appreciate that. Thanks, John.
And just a quick follow-up for John, building on Vice Chair Quinn. Will you be reaching out to the applicant to propose the potential of deferral?
Yes, I will. I think that he was aware that the suggestion was that the approval be given conditional on, and he was prepared to address the conditional on issues. So I think it's 6 of one or half dozen of the other. Right? At this point, the staff recommendation was to approve it and to negotiate some of the changes required. I see no reason why those changes couldn't come back at the next, if you approved it, at the next meeting in January, if that was suitable.
Well, I think that we're hearing that deferral, especially the suggestion from Heritage Ottawa, is a reasonable way forward. So, we'll continue with our deliberations, but it would be appreciated, I suppose, if you could contact the applicant to see noting that the applicant's permission is required for the subcommittee to move forward with deferral. So we would at least like you to explore that possibility. But in the meantime, we do have the application before us, and we will continue listening to delegations. So thank you so much, John, for your deputation today. And the next delegate that we will hear from is Tony Brunst.
I don't know if you can see me and hear me.
We can see you and we can hear you, and you have 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you. We're phoning you in from the Turks and Caicos. I'm with my wife, Dorinda. We only found out about this, well, it's probably 2 weeks ago or so. And we live at 560 Hillsdale, which is on the north side, the bottom part of that back lot. And we've been living there. Well, I've been living there for 28 years. We've actually missed not having neighbors for the last 15, and we'd like to welcome new neighbors into the neighborhood. I've spoken with Andrew Reeves. I know I've spoken with other people who know many of the other people involved with this development. And I think they certainly have worthy reputations of doing good work. But I must say, in this case, I find that what is being proposed is really more like a industrial commercial configuration. And I find that unfortunate. And the issues raised by the Heritage Committee of mathing and depths in the lot, I think are very valid. I mean, I have a question which perhaps somebody could answer on the development side is, what is actually the height of the back part of that building from the ground? I know it's 3 stories. I wanted also to just say thank you for all the help I've received from Adrian Van Wyck, and it's a pleasure to meet you for the first time, Ralston King. So going from there, it was interesting to hear John Stewart talk about the eye-catcher skybox. And I noticed that in the presentation, they were talking about the Massey House and how that was on stilts too. And the Massey House, the genius of it is that they used these sort of stilts to actually build something which could overlook the lake, which was really not possible to build without. And it didn't actually, it was looking on the lake. It wasn't looking into anyone's backyard or front yard or the streetscape or anything like this. This is something absolutely different. It reminds me more of a sort of a hunting lodge, shooting blind or something like that. And I don't see it as an eye catcher. And I've lived in the UK for 10 years and I didn't see much of those either, having been around quite a bit there. I see it as an eyesore, frankly. And in contrast to the Massey House, the whole terrace at the top of this thing is built to face into our backyard, which I find is, a bit disingenuous when you're talking about all the care that's been taken to present something that is going to fit in well with the neighborhood. So unfortunately, I have that little complaint to bring forward. I think some of the other things have already been discussed, but I would also want to and speak to you on this, Andrew Reeves. I did reach out to you because I feel it's important to try and contact all the people involved that I can. And we talked about landscaping and so on. And in fact, I did put a little proposal to you saying that if you met all the demands of the Heritage Committee, I would love you to put in some coniferous trees. And I gave you some indications on how they should go. And I sent you a little note asking you if you could go ahead with that, which you said you could, but I noticed that you never replied with any signatures on it. I was a bit disappointed to see that. Also, having listened to the people who have spoken today, I found that there really are a number of things that are troubling. One of the things that came out in John Stewart's presentation was showing the elevation on the back part of our property, which sort of shows a little mound somewhere near the borderline, which absolutely doesn't exist. So it's sort of whimsical. I mean, it's nonsense, actually. And it makes the height of the building on the development side seem lower. Finally, I guess I would say, I hope you can come to some conclusion. I do believe it's important, though, given that at this stage, we're not far enough developed in terms of what the developers are ready to compromise on, even though they're very good and I believe great reputations. We need to have it come back to committee without doubt in my mind. Thank you very much for your time and wish you all well.
Thank you, Tony. And I don't see any raised hands for questions for you. So thank you for your deputation, much appreciated. And the next registered speaker on our list is Marianne Favor of the Rocklift Park Residents Association.
Good morning. Okay, so we too are very alarmed to see that this application is proposed for conditional approval. We all know what that means. And, the horses let out of the barn and our heritage plan will be disrespected, and certainly not, we don't expect it to be followed once you give conditional approval. The Rocklift Park Heritage Committee has serious concerns about the massing, height, and length of the building and its potential impact on the adjacent Grade 1 property and the cultural heritage landscape of the district. The building is extreme in its length, mass, and height, all of which are contrary to the intent of the Heritage District, and in fact could be described as being in gross breach of them. Although the proposed building length has been reduced somewhat, it still, I think it's at least 110 feet. And the committee, our committee suggested that an appropriate rear yard on this particularly long property would be 80 feet, which would be more proportionate to the other properties in the area. Present rear yard is 50 feet. We'd like to see the retention of more greenscape, and because once again, we're faced with too much paving of paradise here. Okay, so to address although the massing of the front of the facade satisfies the HCD plan in relation to the streetscape, the rest of the building does not. The length of the building, which follows the maximum allowable side yard setback closely on both the south and the north sides, is completely out of character and inconsistent with the intent of the HCD. In addition to concerns over the length of the building, the narrow side yard setback provides a very narrow corridor for the planting of mature trees. The proposed building will present an extremely long, extremely high continuous wall to the neighbors on both the south and the north side. And I would say particularly egregious on the north side because one would be hard pressed to find any kind of mature trees that would grow and thrive in the perpetual shade of a north wall that's 30 and 40 feet high in places. The massing of the building is of great concern. Just one second. The property is an unusually large property. One could say it's at least twice the size of the average property on the streetscape, and yet the massing of the building is such that it has an FSI of 0.358 and questionably more if should the basement and all the open stairwells be included in this calculation. This lot is on a hill, so that the ordinary definition of average grade under the bylaws doesn't apply to a house that's over 100 feet long and goes down a hill. When a building's on a hill, the grade cannot be the average elevation of the lot from top to bottom of the hill because it leads to an absurd result. The grade should mean the average elevation of the adjoining ground in different segments of the hill as it is to be built upon. The committee contends the design of this would-be basement is not such that more than half of its floor to ceiling height is below average grade, it's plain and obvious that many of the rooms are above ground and cannot be classified as basement. And for this reason should be counted in the FSI, which would blow the FSI way over what is now reported. The height of the adjacent grade 1 building has also been erroneously calculated, affecting the permissible height of the property of 480. Plan says the height of the proposed building should not be higher than the grade 1 at 484 Cloverdale. The proponent has measured the height of 484 Cloverdale to the peak of the gable, where it should be measured to the midpoint of the sloped roof as specified by Ottawa bylaws. For these and these many reasons, the committee feels strongly that this proposal runs contrary to the provisions of the HCD plan and requires far too many major changes to receive approval at this stage. I've actually been part of this whole process, and I acknowledge that, yes, there have been changes made, but we have been saying about this massing for since the very beginning, and then the height and so on, and we see very minimal changes, and it's anyway. Well, we're not against the design of the building, but we certainly are against the massing, height, and length, and that's about it for now.
Thank you, Marianne, for your deputation. I don't see any hands raised, so thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And the next registered speaker on our list is Susan Dequino.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
You can see me.
We can hear you, Susan. So you do have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. I live a block away from the proposed house, new house on Cloverdale. In fact, in the Massey House that has been mentioned by Tony Brunst. I'm opposed to conditional approval of this application for I think the extraordinarily valid reasons that have been expressed. When the new Rocklift Park Heritage Plan was being developed, and I was part of that process, a limit on the mass and height of new buildings were among the most essential provisions in the Heritage Plan, because there was a huge concern at the time about the proliferation of so-called monster houses. And that's why the plan says that the mass and height of new houses have to be consistent, not with just other houses in the street, as John Stewart seemed to suggest, but with the grade 1 houses in the streetscape, not the others. And that's because the grade 1 houses are the ones that best amplify the heritage character of Rocklift Park. So the grade 1 house that's relevant is the one right next door, which Kim Ratushny spoke to at the beginning. It's their house that it has to be consistent with in mass and height. It is not consistent with that. The staff report clearly acknowledges that time and again, that it's not consistent with the mass of the house next door, nor with the height of it. And they go on to say, it's not consistent with the proposal is not consistent with the maintenance of Rocklift Park's park-like setting. Now they suggest that conditional approval be given so that something can be reconfigured or it can be reconsidered. Now, I don't know what reconfiguring and reconsidering would look like, and the staff would be in the position of solely judging whatever that means and whether those conditions have been met. And I don't think that's fair. It is not transparent. And therefore, I think that given that it looks like the applicant may not be prepared to extend the period allowed for consideration, that it would have to be rejected. Now, just to make the point, the staff report says on page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8, and in document 11, it sets out time and again how the mass and length of this building, it just is not consistent with the grade 1's house in the streetscape, nor with the heritage plan of Rocklift Park. Bylaws are relevant, and this conforms with the bylaws, but I'm sorry, when you're in a heritage conservation district, you have to conform with more than the bylaws. You have to conform with the heritage plan. As for height, the previous speaker noted that the height of grade one of sloped roof buildings, like the grade one building next door, it's measured to the midpoint of the slope, not to the top of the slope, not to the top of the house. Yet that is what is suggested is relevant, the top of the house. It's not. It's the midpoint of the house. That's in the Ottawa zoning bylaw. And that's the agreed interpretation between the we who are concerned with heritage in Rocklift and the heritage staff. It says that for a new building to be consistent with a grade one house with a sloped roof, it has to match the midpoint of the roof slope. The midpoint of the roof slope, the house, the proposed house is above the midpoint. It's even above the height of the top of the roof. It is 1.5 feet, half a meter higher than the top, let alone the midpoint. So let me conclude. This proposal does not conform with the Rocklift Heritage Plan in very significant ways. It should not be granted conditional approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan, for your deputation. I see no hands raised, so thank you so much. The next registered speaker is David Fleming of Heritage Ottawa. And David, you're on mute. And unfortunately, we still can't hear you, despite the fact that it looks like your microphone is off mute. And it seems that David is having some technical difficulties. I don't know if we can just give him a few seconds here to see if he can sort them out, since we have the visual. If not, an option for David would be to call in as well. And we might be able to hear you, David, so I don't know if you can.
Is that better?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I had my earphones plugged in the wrong jaw there. Thank you. Heritage Ottawa is pleased to have an opportunity to comment on the proposed addition to the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation District. It is apparent that the applicant has made a sincere effort to make the new construction conform to the Rocklift Park Heritage District Plan guidelines, especially those relating to street front massing and setback, building materials, siting, incorporation of existing landscape features, and the preponderance of softscape, with the landscape features being prominent as required by the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation District Plan and guidelines. Although its unique modern design and irregular footprint makes it less sympathetic to the existing homes with their more conventional designs, this should not justify outright rejection of the current design. We do, however, agree with the staff report that the massing of the north wing as currently designed is not compatible with the grade 1 building at 484 Cloverdale Road. Of more concern is the staff recommendation to make approval of this application subject to the changes requested, and to delegate staff to decide if and when such changes are in accordance with guidelines 7.4.2, 3, and 4 of the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation District Plan. Most of us remember all too well the consequences of a subcommittee recommendation of June 2018 concerning the proposed addition to the Chateau Laurier Hotel, when council subsequently approved an application subject to future staff approval of some revisions to try and make the addition more visually compatible with the existing Chateau Laurier. it did not end well when staff made the recommendation 1 year later to approve an even more unsuitable addition. Rather than give qualified approval of the current application, would it not be preferable to delay a subcommittee recommendation until staff feel they can either wholeheartedly recommend the project or in turn reject it? Delaying consideration would likely require the city to seek approval from the applicant to extend the 90-day statutory timeline under the Ontario Heritage Act. This might be an attractive option, which could provide some certainty to both the applicant and the city. If the latter process is not feasible, we would hope that the applicant would make a concerted effort to redesign the house to address the conditions contained in document 14. We congratulate the proponent on the overall design of this innovative home, which could, if necessary changes are made, in our opinion, make a positive contribution to the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation District. We also recognize the contribution of the Rocklift Park Heritage Committee and the city's heritage planning staff for their efforts in the evolution of this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It was well worth the wait. and working through those technical issues. And there is a question for you from Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, David. So the condition that would be attached to this that staff is recommending is reconfiguring the massing and reducing the length. In your review of what's in front of us currently, can you characterize for us, do you think this is a major reconfiguration, a minor configuration? Is this a bit of a tweak, or is this significant work that would be required to bring it in conformance with the HCD guidelines?
I think it could be brought into the realm of the guidelines. There might be some of the residents that would disagree with me on that. But I think, the architect has indicated that they're willing to try to make some more changes. And I think it's worthwhile trying to go this extra mile rather than have it rejected and possibly ended up in an appeal to Committee of Adjustment or to some arbitration tribunal. It's always nice to be able to negotiate these kind of things without having to take a legal route. I know only too well the challenges of trying to go that route, and I don't think anybody wants to go through that.
Okay, thanks, David. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions for David? Seeing none, thank you, David, for your delegation and for all the work that Heritage Ottawa does on a continuing basis. At this point, does the committee have any questions for staff on this application? And I see that Councillor Gower has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So it's obviously on that condition, I think, that a lot of us are considering here. We're being asked to approve this with the condition that the applicant go back and reconfigure the mass and reduce the length of the north elevation of the building. And we'd be delegating authority to staff to make a determination if they've properly achieved what staff and the committee is looking for. I'm trying to understand from staff's perspective, because I think we've heard it from the applicant. Why did you take this approach? Because it seems to me we often we often approve conditions at this committee that have there's conditions for minor changes. This seems to be a more significant design change that's required, a more considerable design update. It's not minor in my mind. So why did staff feel that this was an appropriate approach rather than wait for the applicant to submit the design, have staff's approval, and then bring it to committee? Why have you chosen this approach?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the reason that the application is before the committee today is because we were unable to secure an extension of the 90-day statutory timeline from the applicant. That would have been our preference. to continue to work with the applicant to address the remaining staff concerns around that north elevation. That being said, as Mr. Van Vick outlined in his presentation, staff do feel that the proposal does meet some of the guidelines and the objectives of the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation District Plan. So we were uncomfortable with the idea of an outright refusal because we felt that with some additional work, it could get there. So because of the 90-day statutory timeline, we had to recommend something. And this condition was, in our mind, the best approach to a complicated problem.
So rejecting it outright wouldn't have been appropriate in your mind. This is a kind of a compromise or a solution because they're getting close. But how would you characterize it? I've said it seems like a major reconfiguration or redesign to change massing and the length. Is it major? Is it minor? How would you characterize the changes required in order for it to meet what you're looking for to satisfy the requirement?
I think, as Mr. Podolsky perhaps noted, it is a sort of middle of the road change. I wouldn't call it minor, and I wouldn't call it major. I think, we're grappling with the idea that this is a very irregular footprint, and sort of how we fit that within the box of what we normally see in Rocklift Park. So I think it's somewhere in the middle in terms of the extent of the changes required in order to ensure compatibility and that visual continuity across property lines.
Okay. I think what staff have suggested is reasonable, an approval with conditions, but I want to make sure I understand if we approve this and the applicant does not meet the conditions, what happens to this application?
I'm actually going to defer to Ms. Enta from legal on that answer.
Mr. Chair, if the applicant does not meet the conditions, then staff cannot make a recommendation with respect to revised plans coming forward. And therefore, the permit does reside in legal limbo at that point. And the permit cannot be issued because the conditions have not been met. So the applicant would have to file a new application for what they want to do, which would then go through the process again and come forward for consideration. Or the applicant always has the ability to file an appeal at the tribunal with respect to having their application approved with conditions by this council. So that is what happens. It's a chain reaction depending on which direction the applicant takes once council makes its decision on this.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gower. And the next member with a question is Member Podolsky.
Yes, this is a question to staff, and they may seem like minor and unrelated questions, but we've had the architect declare that the project as submitted meets the zoning bylaw absolutely, that there's no variances required. Question, has this been actually independently agreed to by the planning, land use planners and the zoning bylaw people? The whole question of using the gross floor area of the basement not being counted. So my question is, has this been independently evaluated by the land use planners? And I have a second question after that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant has indicated to us that they have spoken with city staff in the planning department and that they have confirmed that the project does meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw.
Great, thank you very much. And my second question, and this would be something that if you could put the site plan up on the screen, Eric, that would be helpful. Sorry to take you by surprise to get you to act so quickly, but if you would do that, it has to do with the site plan showing a proposed building on the vacant lot at 454 Cloverdale. This may seem unrelated, but I think the question needs to be asked where the basis of that footprint came from. In other words, is there an application that has been submitted that shows a footprint of a building on 454 Cloverdale in the location that is shown?
I can maybe start answering that question until the site plan comes up. So the Heritage staff are not aware of any application submitted at this time for construction at 454 Cloverdale. I believe the reason it might have been shown in this way is because that is a double lot. So the way that the building is shown is just on the first half of the lot. It is our understanding that it is under the same ownership. The owner owns the front and the back portion of that lot. But I suspect that's the way, or that's the reason the building was shown in that way.
Eric, if you're able to get the site plan on the screen, that would be helpful. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to defer the length of time of the meeting that it might take to get this up. I guess, Mr. Chair, Chair King, the point being that if the application for the development of the next lot was a small footprint, like what is shown on the site plan, then the whole issue of the continuity of the park-like setting is different than if another house was proposed there with the same kind of configuration that is being proposed, at 480 Cloverdale. So you can see one of the things that I'm looking at towards the future. But Chair King, if it's not possible to get that answer right now, perhaps we can just wait and proceed with the meeting until we can get that shown on the screen.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I think that's the best way to proceed. So the next person with their hands up is Member Hassel.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick questions for City staff. The recommendations, as we all know, are calling for an adjustment to the height, form, and massing of the building. I wanted to know, in your discussions with the applicant, have City staff put forward any preferred path or recommended options for how this could be achieved?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. City staff have made some suggestions to the applicant on possible solutions. We aren't able to dictate the direction of the design to the applicant, so it is up to the applicant how they want to respond to the concerns, but a number of suggestions have been made by staff and by the community as well.
Would you be able to give a few examples of those proposed solutions?
Yes, absolutely. So some of the solutions that we've considered might be worth evaluating are perhaps removing the floating volume at the rear of the building. That would reduce the length overall of the north elevation. It might be an appropriate solution to relocate it to the south side of the lot where there is no adjacent grade 1 property. Or alternatively, it might be possible to swing some of that volume away from the north lot line. Those are just some preliminary ideas.
Okay, and we heard from the proponent's architect today that they're very confident in their design. So I assume not much progress has been made after those suggestions.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. So having heard from the proponent's architect that they're confident in their design, How is the city planning to, I guess, identify and ensure that the mitigations that come forward, if conditional approval is granted, do comply with the Heritage Conservation District plans and the city's own criteria, the conditional approval?
I can answer this one, Mr. Chair. So, I mean, I think this is, as the committee has noticed, a somewhat unusual example of a condition. And that's why in the condition, we put sort of the language of in consultation with heritage planning staff. So we are not architects, and we try to stay out of the realm of designing the building for the applicant, but we do provide them with perhaps suggestions on how we could mitigate impact. And so one of the ways that we've suggested in a more general sense of mitigating impact is to create a bit more of a compact footprint than what we see on the lot today. So despite the fact that it may meet the zoning bylaw in terms of lot coverage, et cetera, that doesn't necessarily mean it meets the provisions of the Heritage Conservation District plan. So we will basically be making some of the same suggestions again, but with the endorsement of council to give us this direction to move, that it's a conditional approval, that they can't go further unless they do this, unless they make some changes to better reflect the cultural heritage landscape of the Rocklift Park HCD. I know that's a very general answer, but I hope that, as you probably know, these things can go back and forth for months in terms of assessing impact once you see a change to a design.
Thank you. And I know there's only so much you can say with the generalities and the state that the design is in right now. A final question for you, Leslie or Adrian or someone in your group. I was wondering if you could spell out for us. We've already heard the path forward if conditional approval is granted. But could you just at a high level summarize the path if it's not, if the Built Heritage Subcommittee does not endorse this application?
So meaning if the application is refused?
Yes.
Okay. I might defer this one to, I know the answer, but I might defer this to Christine Enta as well, just to get a legal response.
Can you hear? I'm having some technical difficulties, so please, I apologize. If this application is refused today, there will be a motion to change the recommendation to a refusal. It will rise to planning committee at that point, and then rise to council, depending on what that outcome is. The applicant then, of course, has the right of appeal to the tribunal within a period of time. I believe it's 30 days from council's decision and notification of that decision. Does that answer the question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I think that is sufficient. Yes. So was that your last question, Member Hassel?
Yes, it was. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I had just been notified by the committee coordinator that we do have the slide that Member Podolsky had asked for. So before we go to Councillor Brockington, I'll ask Eric to bring up that slide, and I'll ask Barry to resume speaking to the slide and potentially asking staff questions based on the slide. And you're on mute, Barry.
I have to click harder on the icon. Yes, thank you very much. What we have here on the screen is what I was asking for. The proponent has shown the partial footprint of a new building at 454 Cloverdale. That's at the bottom of the screen. And from the response of Adrian, our heritage planner, this does not reflect any application that has been made by the owner of that property for a new building. And so therefore the showing of this footprint is, I guess, arbitrary and conjectural and doesn't really reflect any proposal for development of this property. So that's really my understanding of it. And thank you for showing this on the screen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And we have one last hand raised, and that's Councillor Brockington for questions.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to you.
Ms. Etna, I'm glad you're here today. I want to pose a set of questions to you as well, just so it's 100% clear in my mind, the ramifications of such a decision. So item 2 of the recommendation, the staff recommendation, talks about this subcommittee delegating the authority to staff to oversee the minor design changes of this proposal. If the subcommittee wanted to hold this particular recommendation and have a brief update or presentation to us of the revised design, did I hear you correctly that that would mean this application passed some sort of time limit and the applicant would have to reapply? Am I mixing that up, or did I hear you correctly?
So, Mr. Chair, as you are aware, there is a timeline under the Ontario Heritage Act, the 90-day timeline, whereby if council does not make a decision on an application, it is deemed approved. And so that is why our legislative agenda moves at the pace that it does for these matters. And so if the applicant refuses to sign a letter of extension, which is also permitted under the Act, to stop the 90-day timeline issue, then yes, we do need to consider that 90 days to avoid the deemed approval. So, Mr. Chair, is the question that staff makes its recommendation on whether the conditions have been met and the GM gives the approval and this committee is updated on that after the fact? What is the path that Councillor Brockington is looking for?
Thank you for that. So I'll tell you what I'm prepared to do. I don't want to speak for the subcommittee. I'm prepared to approve items 1 and 3 today. And I would hope that the subcommittee would agree with me that as a condition, or sorry, not as a condition. So let me start over. We approve 1 and 3 today. We don't approve number 2. And what we say to staff is, once you've come to an agreement on minor design changes, which some people believe are a lot more than minor, you come back to this subcommittee, recognizing we could be past those 90 days. And you allow the committee one last chance to see what the final outcome will be. Or maybe from a legal point of view, we have to make that as a condition because we've already approved 1 and 3, and there may not be any recourse if we disagree with the design at that point. But I think that that is a fair outcome for members of the public who have concerns. Ultimately, it would be back to this subcommittee to see those final changes. I'm just trying to see what the right compromise or balance would be. Instead of just approving everything, we've heard concerns, people reference the Chateau Laurier. Obviously, this is not, the same scope as the Chateau, but that's what I'm looking for, Ms. Etna, is I do want the subcommittee the ability to see what the final design is of this development.
And Mr. Chair, for clarification, I have 2 points. Item 2 is the standard minor changes back to staff. So I'm just not certain which reference point we're looking at. And secondly, is it that the councillor wishes for this committee to have approval over the revised plans or to simply see them once staff have made their recommendation?
I mean, that's an ultimately a question that has to be decided upon. I want to hear what my colleagues, if I'm the only one that thinks this way, then perhaps we're spending a lot of time on something that the subcommittee doesn't think is required. But what I heard from the public was concern that we would give the green light to everything today, and a desire to at least see changes to this proposal one last time. And I'm struggling with whether we make that a condition or simply have staff come back to this subcommittee and say, here's the outcome of our discussions, here's what the final development will look like.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chair. I believe with coming back to this committee before council makes its decision, we will bump into the 90-day issue without a deferral, and without the deferral and the agreement of the applicant. And but if that is the direction that the councillor wishes, certainly staff can look at what needs to be done in order to accommodate that.
Fair enough. So I will stop there, and if folks feel so inclined to chime in and share their opinion, I'm all ears. So thank you, Ms. Edna.
And thank you, Councillor Brockington. I do see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand. And just based on some of your observations, it might be procedurally easier to move forward with a deferral, but I'll let Vice Chair Quinn speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, indeed, just picking up on Councillor Brockington's concerns, I have the same. I would like to bring a motion forward today for deferral. Should I go ahead and read that, Chair?
Yes, please. Please proceed.
Whereas the applicant has advised Built Heritage Subcommittee of their desire to defer the matter to the first Built Heritage Subcommittee meeting of 2022, and whereas staff have no objections to the request for deferral, and whereas the 90-day statutory timeline under Section 42-4 of the Ontario Heritage Act expires on January 20th, 2022, and the first council meeting of 2022 is anticipated to be January 26th, 2022, and whereas the applicant has indicated agreement to the proposed extension of the Ontario Heritage Act timeline, and whereas absent such consent for extension being provided in writing, the application will be deemed to be approved if council does not make a decision by January 20th, 2022. Therefore, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee defer the report until its next regular meeting, anticipated to be held in January 2022, and be it further resolved that if the applicant does not provide written consent to extend the 90-day timeline under the Ontario Heritage Act by December 2nd, 2021, the Built Heritage Subcommittee's report on this item will be submitted to council for consideration at the December 8th council meeting.
Thank you for bringing that motion. And colleagues, it would have been my preference for the applicant to have willingly worked with Heritage staff in this instance to defer based upon the considerations outlined in Section 7 of the Heritage Conservation Plan, which notes that new buildings shall be of their own time, but sympathetic to the character of their historic neighbors in terms of massing, heights, and materials. Deferral, however, as we note, can only really take place with the agreement of the applicant. And Section 42.4 of the Ontario Heritage Act requires that council, after consultation with our committee, make a decision on applications within 90 days. The statutory timeline for this application, as we heard, is set to expire on January 20th, 2022. And also, as we heard from staff, the timeline can really only be extended with the agreement of the applicant. But my understanding is that the way that this motion has been drawn up, we can still wait and obtain that approval from the applicant if they wish to really proceed with this process. Staff requested initially that the applicant extend the 90-day timeline in order to allow more time to work together on the design. And the applicant declined at that time and decided to proceed as is. As a result, staff were required to bring this report forward to council for a decision. And as introduced, and they did introduce conditions on the permit, but I would have preferred that the applicant agree with deferral, since the comments from both the community association and residents that we heard today, in my estimation, were quite compelling, that the property as proposed is inconsistent based on length and massing based upon the Heritage Conservation Plan. In my opinion, these elements should be more fully addressed before the application is advanced and approved. Since what we heard, I think, is that considerable design updates are required. So as a consequence, I would support this motion of deferral so that both the applicant, the community, and staff can have reasonable time to get to a better design. And I see that Councillor Brockington has raised his hand.
Chair, can I just get confirmation? The motion in 2 clauses states the applicant is in agreement to a deferral, despite the fact that earlier responses to the request were in the negative. Have we received informal communication that the applicant is willing to go down this road?
The applicant has until Thursday to get back in writing.
I see that. Otherwise, it goes to council in December. But have conversations recently take place where the applicant or their rep has indicated they're willing to agree to a deferral?
I can answer this question through you, Chair. Heritage staff have not received any indication from the applicant that they are willing to consider deferral.
Okay. I still support the motion because I think we're acting in good faith here. We're willing to work with them and want more time as per what the chair said in his comments. So I just want to make sure the motion, the whereas statements are factual.
And that's fair. We want to ensure that our recitals in the motion are factual. I see that Caitlin has raised her hand on behalf of staff.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe that first recital was introduced by a drafting error. So we can remove that first recital as staff have confirmed that it is not accurate. And it does not change the substance of the approval.
Thank you for that. And I see that member Podolsky has raised his hand as well.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Caroline, for drafting that, and Councillor Brockington for your efforts. One thing I'm not clear of, and I would like to be very cautious about this, and that is that if there is no response from the applicant to defer, then is the recommendation to council going to be to refuse the application? Or is it all the way in which the staff recommendations are listed? I think this is quite important for both the public and the committee to understand. So could that be clarified, please?
Mr. Chair, I will always defer to the deputy clerk on this, but if the condition is not met and this rises to council, it will rise to council under the staff recommendation without comments from this committee as to acceptance or refusal at this time.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll further clarify that the recommendation before council would be that council consider it. And so a motion would be required to be brought forward at council to either amend, refuse, or approve at that time. So the staff recommendation to approve would not be automatically before council. Council would have to move a motion to approve, amend, or refuse as they deem fit.
Thank you for that clarification. And I see that Vice Chair Quinn has raised her hand.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that I bring this motion forward with the assumption, obviously, that the owner is going to agree to this deferral. It's not a full additional 90 days that the motion is asking for, but just to take us to the end of January. This is why I asked the question of John Stewart earlier in the meeting if this would be something he would recommend to the owner, and he seemed his response was that he would recommend that. We've heard from Mr. Stewart, and again from the architect, that this is an owner who has worked extensively to alter the design up to this point when to meet concerns expressed within the community, and also wants to raise a multi-generational family in this neighborhood. And therefore, I'm assuming that based on those things, the owner will want to allow as much transparency around this project as possible, as if nothing else, to demonstrate goodwill within their new community. And I personally think that I know that we've heard from representatives from the community who are perhaps would probably disagree with me in terms of the amount of alterations that could be made to get this design ready. But I really think that there's an opportunity for us to get it there. So I really do strongly urge the owner to take this into the end of January. If the motion, of course, depends on my colleagues, should carry. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Quinn. I don't see any other hands raised, so we do have this motion for deferral in front of us. Is this motion carried? Oh, and before we do that, I do see that Member Podolsky has raised his hand to speak to the deferral motion.
Yes, thank you very much. We have let ourselves down into a fairly complicated route on this application, in that it is unclear if we approve this motion to defer, that the applicant will actually agree by December the 2nd. But I think that I would, with all due respect, I think I will vote against this motion, because what it appears is that the applicant was given the opportunity, by the heritage planners to extend the date of the Heritage Act, and they refused. I also, have heard the architect suggest that they have gone as far as they can go, or willing to go, with the design. So I detect a kind of confrontation here. I'm being fairly blunt about it. And I think that it might be better to be able to clear the air if we would refuse the application, recommend the council refuses the application. Then it's quite clear that the applicant either has to, if council agrees and refuses the application, to go to the tribunal, or to revisit and have some sufficient time to meet with the heritage staff, to meet with the neighbors, and to come up with something that is truly a compromise that reflects the values and attributes of the Rocklift Park Heritage Conservation Plan. So I just wanted to put on notice that I'm very concerned about a kind of short-term hybrid process that may not end up with any positive results. And consequently, with all due respect, I think that I would vote against this deferral. And if there's an opportunity to vote for refusal, that's the route that I'm going to take. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that, Member Podolsky. The motion is still in front of us, though, for a deferral. And as I had noted before, I think that more time is required for both the community, for both the applicant and both staff to have discussions on addressing issues of massing and length. And we did get acknowledgement from city staff, from or legal, that it would go before council with still opportunities to address specific issues around the application if they are not fulfilling elements that are outlined in the Heritage Conservation Plan. Based on that, I am still willing to support this motion of deferral. And based on your request to dissent, I think it makes sense in terms of parliamentary procedure to actually call a vote. So yays and nays on the motion for deferral.
Member Halsell.
If I may, Chair, could I ask a quick question of procedure? Prior to, okay. Should the, I suppose where I'm coming from on this is that I also am in agreement with what Member Podolsky has said, but would prefer the motion than just flat out support as it is right now. So should the motion carry, we would not then have the opportunity to vote for refusal, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and should the motion carry, we would then have the opportunity to vote for refusal, but our ship has sailed on the motion.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, and so that was a question of clarification. So I'll ask Eric to proceed with vote yay and nay on the motion to defer.
Member Halsell. Member Halsell, yay or nay?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's a more difficult one.
Yeah. Member Podolsky.
Nay.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor McKenney.
Yes.
Member Conforti.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Moffitt.
Yes.
Vice Chair Quinn.
Yes.
Chair King.
Yes.
8 yeas, 1 nay.
Thank you. The motion is carried. And ultimately, this report will be scheduled to come ultimately to council after the process has been undertaken. We have no in-camera items. We do have information previously distributed concerning Lower Town West and Byward Market Heritage Conservation District update, but there is no presentation on that item. We have no notices of motions to date. And I'm supposing we don't have anybody introducing those notices of motion. And we also have no inquiries filed to date. Under other business, there was one planning circulation on the agenda, which was distributed to members prior to the meeting. Members of the public have the opportunity to comment through DevApps on ottawa.ca. Ontario Heritage applications would be considered at a later date. And under those planning circulations, we do have the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 322 Waverly Street West. Is there any other business? Seeing none, on adjournment, is the motion carried?
Carried.
Carried.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. The next regular meeting has not been scheduled yet, but we do anticipate that it most likely will be held in latter January, potentially January 25th. And we just did not want to confirm because we typically go through votes to confirm our calendar. But thank you so much for your participation on this meeting. And if I do not see you, happy holidays, everyone.
Chair, can I just ask, should our next meeting not be before the January council meeting based on what we've just discussed? We should be meeting mid-January, correct?
That could be a possibility, but I will defer to Caitlin.
Okay.
Therefore,
we don't have to debate it now, but I think we should meet before the council meeting.
Yes, Mr. Cho, we'll be reviewing that with you to ensure that any matters that need to go to council on the 26th can rise to council accordingly.
Thank you. Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks,
thank you. Well, thank you to staff for the clarification, and thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone.